Cool. Well, maybe we'll get started, and then as soon as Wade arrives, I'll just add him up as a speaker. So as always, like I know we probably all know each other, but maybe just for the people in the room, the topic of these past couple of weeks that we've done this has basically been chatting about curation in the NFT space and just bouncing off a lot of different ideas, perspectives, and thoughts around how to work on bringing curation in the NFT space more, and what would be the initiatives, and also hearing from a lot of the artists in the space of what they would like to see as well. So just quickly introducing yourself, like literally 30 seconds, and then we'll get started from there. Sam, starting with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Brukhman. I'm business development at Async Art. Really happy to be here. Over the last 6 months, Async has expanded quite significantly, and we've had a lot of conversations re curation. So really happy to be here amongst these amazing people.
Thanks, Sam. Aleksandra.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aleksandra. I work as a head of partnerships at Art.Arts, and I'm also the founder of Electric Artifacts, and super happy to be back here.
Yep, Colborn.
Yep, Colborn Bell. I'm, co-founder and curator of the Museum of Crypto Art, which is a, virtual museum of digital art design for the metaverse.
And Anne.
Hi, I'm Anne. So I lead our art and cultural program at Supera, and I joined Supera like a year ago. And for the past year, I've been mostly working on editorial, but now I'm gonna focus more on making crypto art exhibitions, events. So I think a lot of kind of similar to what curators do.
Super. Thanks so much. For those of you who don't know me, my name is McCall, and I'm the founder of Vertical Cryptoart, which is basically a profile, or let's say media, dedicated to talking about artists, doing live streams, and just documenting what is happening in the NFT space. So I kind of, we touched on like a lot of different concepts over the last couple of weeks, but I think like one of probably the biggest topics that I kind of wanted to open up to, the speakers, but also the room in general, is I've seen a lot of lately, and I think like a lot of the speakers here have also been talking about this, is like, how do we define the artistic movement that is happening, like crypto artists versus like NFT artists? Like, how can we basically bring curation into also like defining this aspect that is being so talked about, like in the last couple of weeks? Like, what does it mean to be an NFT artist or just an artist? Like, how can curation like help to bridge that kind of gap, I guess, in a way, of being an NFT artist or just an artist? And I'm opening up to anybody who wants to start this conversation. And yeah.
I'm happy to jump in there. I fully reject the term NFT artist. I don't think that is a valid term. And I think words are important. And I think, how ultimately, we curate the words and the language here is of high importance. I think crypto artists fought for years, right? for it to be called crypto art and then to be referred to as crypto artists. So when I go back to kind of original intent of the space, and we begin to like think of the philosophical reasons and the ideals why artists began minting NFTs, that speaks to what the crypto art movement is and what a crypto artist is. And that was done because they believed in the technology to disintermediate, right, a traditional system, for them to directly access a global network of creators, for them to put forward like art and self-expression that they thought was valid, and nobody had to like curate or gatekeep them. And you know, it was a movement of self-empowering artists through the use of blockchain technology.
Just to jump in here really quickly, you know, when we talk about the idea of crypto art, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that, you know, crypto art really started with literally artwork that contained images of all of the different cryptocurrencies that were available. You know, Joseph Bellini is an example of that. Several people, several artists, you know, sort of still utilize that. So in my mind, crypto art also sort of envelops this idea, this artistic movement of literally putting in cryptocurrencies into artwork, and so on.
Actually, yeah, I also agree with what Sam said. I think some people were defining online because I guess there is, at the end of the day, there is a difference between crypto, what we refer to sort of as crypto artists and NFT artists. Or if not, maybe Colborn, what do you think? Like, how would you refer to the people who are not part of the culture, but they're still utilizing the technology?
Yeah, I think they are digital artists. They're internet artists. They could just be artists that mint NFTs, right? I don't think the art is contained within the NFT itself. The NFT really is just a token, right? It's a token standard, and it, you know, might point to the metadata where a digital artwork is hosted, but we have to like kind of get to the realization that we're not particularly collecting artworks here. You know, we're collecting tokens, we're collecting NFTs. And, you know, we have to realize that in this kind of open source paradigm, as you know, cryptocurrency has evolved too, where people borrow code and they borrow contracts, that the artwork itself, that image, is designed to be free and transportable. And in the sharing of that image and that file is where a lot of the power of this artwork resides. But I truly believe that, you know, art is free and designed for the public and meant to be shared. I don't think you can own artwork. You can certainly own a token. And what that token represents is like original intent of kind of like releasing this artwork into this free ecosystem. And because it is, you know, permanently timestamped on a blockchain, it is a solid record of like intent and desire for the artist to, you know, spread this artwork on the internet.
So we're not collecting art.
I don't believe we are.
Because that's interesting because, and I'm sorry to dwell on this topic, but I find it fascinating, the definitions to start. So you have all the art market reports, and they always have this reference to either art or collectibles. And it's two very separate categories, but there's an extremely gray line between what defines an art or a collectible. Then isn't everything a collectible because its purpose is technically to trade the tokens rather than the art itself?
You know, I think that goes back and speaks to intent. You know, what is the intent of the creator? You know, even somebody like Pac has shied away from, you know, his creations as art. He calls himself, you know, a creator. So I think creator is the broad term, and then it's really up for that creator to define if this is a, you know, meant to be an art practice, or if this is meant to be, you know, a exercise in creating collectibles.
Yeah, actually, Pac just shared my interview with him, so I asked him the same question: what is the difference, sort of between an art and collectible? And he also answers the same thing about sort of the intent. Yeah. But it's still a very subjective, I think, definition. Intent and purpose.
It's interesting, like, because in my view, I think like the term NFT artist is more to do with what you can build with a smart contract rather than the artistic term of it. Like actually playing around with what can be done on the blockchain built on a smart contract. So I see that as the term NFT artist. So somebody, you know, like the guys behind NFT 42, like the people who kind of started this movement like early on and are building and have built the grounds for it to be what it is now and also what it will be in the future. So I see that, like, in my opinion, as NFT artists, whilst crypto artists, as Colborn was saying, I guess it's, you know, people that have brought art into the blockchain and have art in, you know, as their primary like leading force in a way of the reason why they are here.
Look, I totally agree and resonate with that. I think the best NFT artists are blockchain developers.
That's really interesting. I think I agree with you, Colbert, but I also think that, like, it's not just the developer, it's also like the creativity and the technicality have to work in tandem with each other, right? So, like, you know, like, let's take art blocks or like async art as an example. You know, we have artists, we create the technology, right? But, like, on the other hand, artists come to async all the time asking for features that, like, we never could have even dreamed of, right? Like, things that didn't even come into our mind. And so I think that the creativity and the technicality of it are really working hand in hand. I think the artist actually has a really huge part to play in sort of pushing the technology. And I think it's this symbiotic relationship of, you know, like, how far can we push this from the creative angle and how can we support it from the technological angle? And so from that framework, I think, like, I would say the best representation of NFT artists is like the mixture of that. It's the mixture of creativity and technical understanding of what crypto is.
Go ahead, Nicole.
No, go ahead, Colborn.
I agree. I mean, I largely buy that. Like, the essence of this movement is that intersection of art plus tech. So you need both art and you need tech. It's just that, you know, for most artists, like, the medium with which they are expressing their creativity is not the NFT. You know, it's the digital work that they are creating and then kind of certifying with an NFT. I'm not really one, you know, I'm not going to, like, demand an artist ever put a label on what they are or what they're creating. I just think the term NFT artists, as it's being used by artists, is probably misunderstood and in general not appropriate.
I completely agree. I know we have a couple of people in the audience as well. Like, I see a couple of names and friends. So if anybody also wants to jump into this discussion or has any comments or questions, like, feel free to raise their hand and I'll just add them on as a speaker. And in the meantime, whilst we wait, if there's anybody who wants to add into this conversation, I'd love to hear your thoughts around this. Are you there, Anne?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I think for me, crypto art should really be defined by artists themselves because, I mean, artists came to the space earlier than other curators and they kind of really build the space themselves. So to me, you know, if you ask me what the crypto art movement is or how we should label the artists, I think it really depends on, you know, how they see themselves. And also another thing is, I know, like, NFT is like a tool and crypto is like, you know, a way of paying those artworks. But to me, if I want to say someone is a crypto artist, I would want to say that this person is really fully invested in the crypto art space, because I see a lot of, very kind of established.
I think you might have muted yourself, Anne.
Sorry. So I see a lot of, kind of established contemporary artists. They join the crypto art space, and sometimes I feel like they're just trying, like they want to sell it to see if this works, or kind of just have an extra income to what they already have. So they're not like fully invested or fully spending their time in building this crypto art movement. So for these artists, even though they use NFTs as a tool to, even to build up their own artist careers, I won't say that they're really crypto artists. To me, crypto artists are really like the early OGs. They just super in love with the movement, believe in the movement, and really have this belief and faith to build this movement up into the future. I think these people are what I think are crypto artists.
That's interesting. I think I agree on the most part. I also do think actually that something came to my mind right now. It's like there's a difference, I guess, between like doing an NFT. So I just saw a tweet like literally just like before this room started around Ellen doing her NFT. The one, I don't know if anybody knows what I'm speaking about. Like she basically draw a cat and like did a selfie. And she's going to, produce this NFT, and, the money will go to charity, et cetera, et cetera. But it's like already like in that way, like I see a complete kind of difference between like an NFT and, let's say, an artistic piece that is put up on one of the platforms like Async, like Super Rare, like others, that holds value for the artist and has a creative process behind it and has some sort of like storytelling where, curation can take place, etc., rather than just, like drawing something and posting it online. Like, I guess anybody can make an NFT, but not really anybody can make art.
Look, it's a really good point. Like a byproduct of creating NFTs and utilizing crypto is that you enter a global and transparent market, right? That is freely accessible. So some people, are using NFTs just to enter this market, and it's okay because it spreads, in my mind, a broader awareness and adoption of cryptocurrency as a currency and a means to facilitate transaction. But that does not necessarily mean in trying to get market access that they align themselves, I guess, fully with the ideals of this, financial revolution in parallel.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. I think we have Studio, who, if you want to chime in or have a question or comment.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Tor from Studio Nouveau. I think, everyone's making really excellent points here. And I ultimately think that there's kind of, it's ultimately a subjective distinction, in my opinion. But just to give an illustration of, I do a lot of research on the history of music NFTs or crypto music. And when you're dealing with kind of history, you often run the risk of viewing things in a different way than certain people might that have created things. And so, for example, when you're talking about crypto music, if you look at RAC, he released an album in 2017 where all the tracks were put on IPFS, and you could purchase, in like a Bandcamp manner with Ether. Is that NFT music or is that crypto music? So, in my personal experience documenting the history of crypto music, there's kind of a reason why I use the term NFT music specifically, because there are certain things which you could maybe call crypto music, but they're not using NFTs. So that's just a quick example I wanted to give.
That's interesting. Can I ask you a follow-up question on this? Like, what's the difference between NFT music and crypto music in your view?
Totally. And so just kind of that's part of the point I'm trying to make, is that to me the distinction is NFT music is where there is a sort of non-fungible or semi-fungible token in the case of like counterparty tokens, where the earliest music-related counterparty token that I found is the DJ Pepe that Rare Skrilla created, where it was it was like 136 semi-fungible tokens. It's sort of like an ERC 1155 sort of concept, where anyone who holds one of those tokens has access to a token-gated playlist, which he still maintains to this day. So I would, I tend to view it that way. Like NFT music is something that has a token in that manner, whether it's a back in the day counterparty token or now ERC Ethereum tokens.
That's really interesting. That's a really interesting take on it. And actually something that we've been sort of thinking about, Async is launching a new feature called Async Music sometime this week. And we're really excited about the ability for doing things like customizing a master track and adding in sort of based on the artist's intent pieces of a larger picture. And yeah, it's really interesting. I think I understand what you're saying. I think what you're saying is like there's a difference between just like, tokenizing music and then creating like an audio-visual experience. And, to be honest, we've seen some of like tokenizing music itself, like just like an MP3. But what we're beginning to see, and we've seen a lot of, I think, the intersection of audio-visual stuff, Blau being one of them, RAC, being able to create visuals, moving images that sort of work with the music. And I think that there's something really interesting about that. I also think that there's something that perhaps, I don't know, I've been thinking about this a lot. I have a musical background, and there's something about adding visuals sometimes that can almost be distracting from the musical element rather than adding something to it. And yeah, it's just been, I see what you're saying. And I think that there's something here to be explored. And to be honest with you, I don't even think that crypto music or NFT music per se has even like scratched the surface of what's possible in the blockchain space. And it'll be really interesting to see sort of how that develops and how we use music to be able to tell a story and use visuals in aiding that story rather than the other way around of like using the music to aid the visual. That has yet to be sort of seen in the space, but very interesting perspective, something that I'm like thinking about as we approach closer to launch date with all these music projects.
Has anyone followed the Eminem drop? I saw on Twitter today a conversation how disappointed one collector was about the fact that there was no sort of actual music involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time. We've seen this with deadmau5 also on Nifty a couple months ago. If you go on deadmau5's Instagram, you can see that it's like this sort of like cynical view of what NFTs are. I think I don't really have an answer to that, but I do think that there are ways to augment music in such a way that we can allow listeners and to experience it completely differently than before or from the current system that we're in now. However, I think it's going to take mindfulness in that, and I think it's going to take a lot of sort of technological development to be able to use sort of like visuals and in the aid in the I don't know in the projection for the musical aspect and the audio aspect.
I think, to your point, Aleksandra, as well about the Eminem drop, and in general, like the points that we're making here, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before about like NFT versus crypto art. Like, to be honest, in my view, I see the Eminem drop as simply an NFT. He's just, got on there and, he has a nifty gateway drop, which is great. He put up a picture and yeah, that's it. Like, there's not really any added value, in my opinion. And maybe, it's not a shared opinion, but I don't see any added value to the ecosystem, to the space, or to the artistic movement itself. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, look, I think we're going to see a lot of continued disappointment with Nifty Gateway. It was a marketplace that built its back, that built on the back of crypto art and crypto artists, but it is now really just a marketplace for NFT distribution and trying to leverage, people's communities to buy, the hottest craze and the hottest fad. And we've seen, I think their numbers have tumbled the most month over month. And, a lot of works on there are trading at big discounts. So this, in my mind, was really reminiscent of 2017 ICO bubble. It's just like, at what point and what utility do you have for multi-hundred or thousands of editions, if not just to speculate? That, in my mind, all falls under the category of collectibles now, and kind of puts the art on the back burner.
So I know we have a couple of people up that have been waiting for a while. So Martin, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I wanted to join because I was thinking a lot about the crypto art definition. I have been working of some sort of like definition model myself, which I'm still not happy with, because during the last year I found it really fundamentally changed. Because initially I thought about dimensions. We have like things like the theme, you have things like the authenticity proof itself, you have things like using the cryptocurrency as some sort of payment, and then you have like elements which are like more conceptual, like a conceptual fusion towards like an NFT or a token, and you have like an intentional kind of like integration of blockchain technology, which can be also crypto art, like for instance, people using smart contracts or issuing a currency, which is kind of a conceptual art piece. But this basic definition, which I kind of prepared, is in the last hype of the last month, showed me that it's still missing some sort of ideological component. Because, if you look at where are the real intentions of many of crypto artists are, we're trying to eliminate or remake the traditional artwork model, right? We want artists to have basically a better say. We have artists to have access. So we are trying to eliminate the middleman. We're trying to establish royalties. The next step will be to establish some sort of token standard which has royalties enforced, which are not being able to be written out by any new smart contract. So, there's a movement towards change, and that ideological component is still missing, I think, in this definition.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really interesting take on it. Nick, how are you? Haven't spoken to you in ages.
Yeah, it's been a while. I know, it's probably been quite some time. I hope you're doing good.
I am.
Yeah. My question was mostly towards art curation. I hear a lot of other artists I talk to on Discord, and just in general all around, of what are your guys' thoughts on bringing more like professional art curators into the space to help with artists? Because, to me, it's kind of maybe a double-edged sword. We do need some sort of curation, because at first I thought maybe Super Rare and Nifty Gateway would be more of a curator aspect, but they're just platforms to me. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on bringing professional art curators? Do you think it would add that middleman in? Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing in your guys' eyes?
Look, I think we saw like Jerry Saltz get totally rejected by the community. The question is, you know, who and what are you curating for, right? And who are the buyers in this market, right? Largely, I think the buyers of crypto art are crypto native individuals, and they are looking to kind of define a crypto culture beyond you know, like whatever it is, money laundering, drug trading, you know, hooded sweatshirt tech bros that are programming all day, right? There is a philosophical component to the cryptocurrency revolution that is being expressed. And for the first time, it's really being expressed visually. And, you know, we're also beginning to tell creatives that, you know, this is a community that values your work, right? And, you know, creativity and how that's injected into the Ethereum blockchain is ultimately how it's going to survive. And like open sourcing and allowing anybody to access and express themselves is, you know, like the core of innovation here. So when we begin to talk about, you know, professional art curators coming in and trying to curate crypto art, well, what really is their place and role in a system that was really just designed to allow artists to connect directly with collectors?
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead. Wait.
And I mean, you know, Nick, I have a little bit of a different perspective on this because I am a curator coming from the traditional, it's kind of funny. I work for a digital gallery and we've been selling digital art as NFTs, not on the blockchain, but through standard certificate of authenticity since 2013. And so like we've been, you know, relatively rejected, I think, by the larger, like capital F, capital A fine art world. So I'm kind of coming from a place of from both. And I mean, the thing that like, I think that like in the context of like the philosophical revolution that Colborn is talking about, like at the end of the day, like what NFTs are is it's a marketplace. It's a way of selling the work, but the conceptual value of the work isn't like changing. It's not like, I mean, it may be talking about different topics, but like art will continue to be political. It will continue to be interrogative. It will continue to be conceptual and conceptually rich. And in order to, and I think that the thing that is detrimental about like just kind of blasting your work into the internet without kind of a curatorial frame is that there's a little bit of a context collapse that happens. And that's a necessary part of the internet and being online is this idea of context collapse. I mean, your work is going to be, if you post it on Instagram, is going to be in a feed with who knows what other things, you know, alongside it. And so that's not only is that, I mean, that's something that anybody working with the internet has had to kind of grapple with and think about, but I think is particularly apparent in this current market ecosystem. And what curators can offer is contextual framing. And what curators can do is bring together the work in places to give it kind of the best possible lens under which it can be seen and let the work kind of live and breathe natively. And that is something that I think will always continue to have value. Curators do a number of things beyond just kind of selecting work. They install the work. They write words about the works. They care for the work and they make sure that the work has longevity for the future. That's something at Transfer Gallery that we're really passionate about, is making sure that the works that we do sell come along with full archival packages. And so these are all things that I'm all for artists curating themselves and curating other artists. I think that's amazing. But I am always wary of like adding more duties to the artist's like job role. I mean, making work alone is like a huge role. That's a lot of work. And I mean, there are arts workers, there's a whole industry of them, of us, of me, out there to kind of facilitate and help with that. And I think there's all different pieces that we can bring to the puzzle. And so like I'm thinking about curation, I'm not thinking purely about like selecting works and saying, this is my super sick presentation. It's like a little bit more subtle than that. And it's softer and it's bringing the works together in like a place that feels like home for them. And that's something that I think is particularly interesting from folks who come outside of, the making process. They come with a perspective that is different than, what someone from a company, someone who, or someone who is making art themselves comes from. They see it differently. And I think that there are, I think that obviously there's a time and a place, and, that's not always something that you need. But I also think that it's something that, will allow us to continue carrying these conversations further. Like if there is a philosophical revolution happening right now, it's curators who will be able to document, archive, and contextualize that so that it can live on for the future and then continue to evolve and develop over time. So I think that there's beyond just the labor component of what curators can offer, which is a huge amount of work and labor, but they can also offer a lot of conceptual richness to your work and to kind of the where it will continue to live on over time. And so, for instance, I think an amazing example of that is Feral File. I think that they've done a really beautiful job of bringing all of these worlds together. The Social Codes show, which was their first exhibition, was curated by Casey Rias, who's the founder of the platform. But the platform is going to continue on every month, coming out with a different curated selection. They bring in a different independent guest curator. I think I'm going to be curating one in a couple months, and they bring their own selection, and that's really cool because that selection then lives outside of as its own kind of isolated capsule, which is nice because then it's not kind of subject to the same sorts of context collapse that you might see just kind of going on OpenSea. Because we've all seen those works that kind of randomly pop up that really feel like they're out there adrift. And this kind
Wait, can I add something right now before you sort of just on that point, just so we don't forget? I think you mentioned so many excellent arguments for curators, and I think that both Feral File and you and Colborn and Sam and all of us are doing what we can to contribute to the conversation. But I just wanted to play a little devil's advocate and also mention the fact that take as an example Robness and the way he was kicked out of a marketplace for putting a trash can. I mean, this would have not happened if he was working with a curator and the show was curated. But because this happened, he gave birth to a whole new art movement. And I think that there should be a balance of both, but we should not try to sort of control the ecosystem, but more contribute to it. And I know, Wade, that's partially what you were saying in terms of the amount of labor that goes into documenting and conceptualizing the work. But again, I do like the idea and the freedom the ecosystem offers. So.
Well, I think there's a difference between curation and moderation. I'm not advocating for someone to moderate work off of a platform, but I think that there is definitely space to create selections and create space within them. So I don't see the curator as someone who's going to say you're in or you're out, but rather to carve out space that is already there.
Colborn, did you want to say something, or Nick? Sorry, I saw you guys were muting.
Yeah. No, I love hearing that. But yeah, go ahead, Colborn.
Yeah, I always love when Wade speaks. Wade, it's great to hear your thoughts. I think the important point that stood out for me was the collapse of context, and when I deal with the ways that I engage with my audience. I know that with an artwork, I really have 0.3 to 0.5 seconds to capture their attention, right? And that artwork, it's a double-edged sword because I need to spread viral content to grow a platform to get more eyeballs on work that I try to present that needs context. So how we balance this idea of bringing more eyeballs to context through viral, pieces and viral marketing has always been an interesting point of challenge for me.
Yeah, a lot of what Wade was saying is I definitely speak to that. I think, being able to curate and help an artist's vision and stay true to what that artist is trying to communicate with with their audience. I think that's important without, pushing their creativity down or their message down is also very important. I'm totally against censorship because I've dealt with that a lot. So being able to kind of reflect the artist's voice and curate it in such a cohesive collection that tells a story, I think is really important. Especially, you have these places pop up like crypto voxels. So being able to curate a cohesive collection in a virtual space, I think is really important. Have these artist advocates, these people that believe in the artist's vision, just like the collectors. So I'm all for that.
Well, absolutely, because I think that, I think that aspect of advocacy is exactly right. Like, curators are the biggest artist advocates. And oftentimes, a curator will have a relationship with the space or the platform. So, say that there is a piece of work that, might get censored by a moderator. Oftentimes, the curator can kind of be like the grease in between that, make sure that, again, in that aspect of care, I think that, again, the role of the curator is shifting. So, for me, that involves going to the platform and being like, look, this piece is going to be offensive, but we need to have it for this XYZ conceptual reason. Do not take it off, or something like that. And I think that also in speaking to what Colborn was saying about the attention economy, he's exactly right in that people don't have a lot of attention, but when you bring a curator on board and you create a show, not as a collection, but as a show, this is a show, this is an exhibition that we're going to put on, this is a presentation for you, that creates space for somebody to come inside and then have their attention be focused on the show, because they're coming to a show. They're not just scrolling a page. They're not just looking through a marketplace for their next buy. They're coming to an exhibition and looking at your presentation. And by placing that frame, it creates the space for them to view the work out, that gives more attention to it. And, I think that there's a lot of fear. Again, it goes back to this idea of curation versus moderation. And a moderating function is is totally different. And I think people are a lot afraid of the constrictions that their work will kind of enter in. But artists don't work with curators unless they know the curator and like the curator and trust the curator. It's not I'm not going to people and then just taking their work and putting it in a box. It's no, all of the shows develop out of conversations. And I've never curated a show where the artist doesn't have at least 50% of the say, as I do, in terms of how it will ultimately be displayed. It's a collaborative effort that is developed together and after many conversations. So I think that that also is something that is helpful for people to remember and to think about. It's it's not just someone coming in and taking your work and putting it somewhere. It's that person working with you to create the context that you also want for it as well. I don't know very many creators who I don't know any creators who do that. I think everybody really tries to have this intimate and meaningful dialogue develop, and ultimately the display environment for the work comes out of that exchange.
I love it. No, I love it that you guys, you speak in my language, so I appreciate you guys' time and insight on that. So thank you.
I think I completely agree. And actually, from my perspective, since being in the space and since interacting with a lot of the artists, it's exactly what Wade you're saying. It's not really about just a curator as a critic, but it's actually establishing a relationship with the artist, even some sort of friendship. You work on an ongoing basis, and the artist is happy to share their thoughts, their process, their creation, their inspiration with you, and you just to me, I've built so many relationships, bar friendships, with a lot of the artists that I've collaborated with, by telling their stories, by just chatting to them, and it's very unique. And I feel there's even more of a maybe connection or bond that you can make in this space. Because of those kind of there's not a barrier per se as you would have in the traditional art world, where there is this art critic or curator as this figure to be almost afraid of, but it's more of simply an ongoing collaboration and friendship that you can have with the artist and help them, as Colborn was saying, in putting their message and their storytelling across through an additional kind of platform as well. So I personally see it as that as well, simply a friendship, like a relationship.
Yeah, and I feel like collectors entering this space, seeing something like a solid collection that really reflects the artist, the collector will start understanding who this artist is, what's their background, where do they come from, what makes them tick. These are a lot of questions I feel like collectors love to hear. They want to be able to connect with the art and reflect and connect with the artists themselves, and even the collector and artist relationship, comes out of that. So having, a strong collection to reflect, that artist's vision and who they are and their ethos, I think is really important.
I think another important point too is that the barrier to entry in a lot of these things has lowered in a lot of ways. Like, I can create my own exhibition in Decentraland, which I do, and so you have a whole community of, and I don't want to divert too far from the topic, but I'm ensconced in this community of OG crypto music creators who I take it upon myself to curate their work when it goes largely ignored in a lot of ways. So, that's kind of us as friends working together, and I can do that on the side, all while being a creator at the same time.
I just have to say, I love your use of the word ensconced. Like, what an amazing vocab word.
Thanks.
The other day I heard the word, I hadn't heard this ever used out loud. Someone used the word assiduously, and I was like, thank you for elevating my brain today. I love vocab.
Colborn, I saw you unmuted. I don't know if you want to add.
No, I was just giving him some props for that. I think it goes back to what you might have missed in the very beginning, Wade, is that we had a long discussion around how words are important, right? And we have to really recognize the sanctity of words and how they relate to the expression, and that also goes back to just how do we begin to contextualize and describe and all kind of wade through the dark here in this emerging movement and paradigm shift.
Actually, I think that brings up an interesting point as well that we just made around exhibitions, and we're seeing quite a lot of exhibitions that are curated by artists. So for example, Joanny Lemercier has created an exhibition called The Fen on Hiket Nunk. There's many more that have been auto curated by artists on crypto voxels and all on Decentraland and the various kind of virtual spaces. And it brings up an interesting topic as well. It's bridging as well the kind of the auto curation that artists can do versus exhibitions that are curated by curators. And I don't know what the thought on this specific topic is. If anybody has it's an open question, basically, something that I've been asking myself.
I think, you're starting to see a lot of artists, artist advocates, lifting up other artists and promoting them and believing in their ethos. So I think I'm all for that. I can see artists are becoming collectors, but artists can become curators, and collectors also can become curators in this space because they just believe the vision of the artist. And I think that's the beauty and the tightness of this community. So I think that's great.
And that's sort of the gray area here, is with the intermingling of all sorts of digital media, this NFT movement, you sometimes have things that a lot of people don't quite understand yet. So the people who are creating these new movements are kind of the best people to curate these things in some ways.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I might open it up to a couple of questions from the audience if we have any, unless anybody else, has anything they want to add or share. Hi, Kyle.
Hi, how are you all?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
Good. I thought this was an interesting topic, and I really appreciated Wade's insight about curation. In that, I'm a musician, so I'm still exploring if the attractiveness of the hype of NFTs is being kind of retrofitted. We talked about the Eminem NFT and all this. And sometimes I'm starting to wonder if music is kind of musicians and labels that are already reaching for every straw that they can are trying to retrofit music into the NFT world, which I think is a visual art first and then sonic and auditory experience second. But the conversations that I've heard until this one is everybody's super excited about the complete absence of curation, and they see that as democratization and all of this. I think that the reality is that there's always a curator, and right now the curator is your 4-inch diagonal screen. And I would much rather have some kind of directional curation, just like record stores. As a DJ, you had record stores were super special before everything went online. You had these different vibes in different cities. So every city you would go to the record store because of the curation that took place in that record store. And so I think I would say it's a good thing to have some degree of curation, and like Wade said, not moderation, but curation, and you can have all these different tastemakers, and I think that would be much better than just having everybody throw their art to a wall and hope that it sticks.
Well, I think that oh, sorry, Sam.
No, it's all good. Go for it.
I was just gonna say that I think that people that fear of curation is the fear that the curator is going to take something away from me, that the curator is going to exclude me or put a structure on something that should be free. And I think that actually what curators do is they don't they only add on to, they don't take away from. So the show or the experience, I mean, the work can still be on the marketplace, and it can be uncurated and only curated by, as you said, the algorithm. But usually curators are not, taking something away from the platform. They're adding something on top of, they're adding an experience that kind of sits on top of what's happening on the marketplace. And what I would hope that we move away from is a model where the marketplace feed is the primary access point into the work. Because I mean, I think that now that's kind of changing, but as people are thinking about what's going to look good on, their marketplace site, but normally work isn't made for the market, or isn't made to fit into to be sold at a marketplace. Though art is made to be experienced on the screen, online, in a gallery, wherever that might be. And so what a curator can do is add to that experience and make that more rich and more inclusive in a lot of ways. I think that the act of curation is actually the opposite of what I think people's fears are a lot of the time.
Kyle, just to add to your point, I don't think that music, I would venture to say that it is not a retrofitting of how music fits into NFTs. I think it's more of an idea of discovery right now. I think that we just haven't realized the possibilities that can be had with music on the blockchain, and especially because, historically we've seen so many different collaborations happen between audio or visual artists and audio and performing arts and so on and so forth. That renaissance is, in my opinion, is about to start. We just haven't realized the potential of how it can be. And I'm talking things like the metaverse, things like, music that can be customized, things like true collaborations. So, and in that sense, I think there's almost a curatorial aspect in that itself, in the ability to be able to sort of, tell stories through music that augment the visual art and vice versa, in equal collaborative ways. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this develops over the next 6 months. As a musician myself, I'm constantly thinking about how this affects performing arts, how this affects collaborations, and everything in between. And like I said, I would just encourage you to think about this as a discovery period rather than a retrofitting, because I really honestly think that that music is about to have a renaissance of its own on the blockchain, in the blockchain space, and I'm really excited to see how that all sort of evolves.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the technology. I haven't seen. I've experimented with some NFTs already, and there's a lot of room for it. There's room for it. Currently what I've seen is it reminds me of the Spinal Tap thing, where he's like, my amp goes up to 11, and they're like, well, why don't you just make 10 go louder? And he's like, but it goes up to 11. And that's where most of the conversations end up when musicians are talking about this. So I think there's space, but I think that right now the euphoria is so high, it's very hard for people to hear any kind of critique or questioning of this. And I think the technology is there, though. I completely agree.
So we have a couple of people. Lucas, hi.
Hi. Yeah. First of all, thanks for all this interesting thoughts I've heard during the conversation. And yeah, I completely agree with Wade and also Sam about the curation aspect. And I personally see the main value where curation could, like the main values that curation could bring is in collaborative efforts like between artists, and not just visual artists, but visual and audio, and like curators might find those different artists and link them together, and also not just artists, but also people who are proficient with blockchain. Going back to the first topic you were talking about like what is an NFT artist, and like create basically a collective NFT artist to bring together artists who are not so proficient and don't understand the technology underlying it, but are good maybe digital artists, musicians and so on, and create this like basically this collaboration, which is in the end effect an NFT art performance. So I think there's huge value in that for which curators could bring.
Great stuff. Howard, how are you? Hi, Howard.
I'm here. My phone is frozen. Sorry. I had a question for Wade. I'm not a musician at all, but I am curious to learn more about how, since this conversation is about kind of like meeting up with curators, what is the best way that someone like a new artist would introduce themselves to meeting more curators? Because right now I don't really know any in my network. So anybody in the room has any recommendations who's had experience working with curators in the past? Not specifically just NFT, but just, with traditional art as well. I feel like a lot of the traditional metrics that have been used can sometimes cross over, or at least that experience can help in the NFT space as well. So, just anybody has any recommendations on how artists can, build those conversations and build that network with curators?
Well, I just want to say there is a new NFT native digital frame coming out called Lago Frame, and they're going to be specializing in curators and connecting curators.
Sorry about that. So someone just tried to call me. But Howard, in order to, that's a really good question. Like, where are the curators, and how do you find them, and how do you get your work curated? And I think that, the answer is to like look at other art shows and like see who the people that you admire are working with. Who's putting together the selection? I mean, any, kind of gallery or space will say like who the curator was. They'll sometimes have it at the bottom of the show text or whatever it might be. And that this is also true in, other beyond just kind of like the traditional gallery world, like in music curation spaces and those kinds of things. That'll usually, they'll say like the playlist will be selected by a certain person or whatever. So I would like look to who inspires you, like who's putting together the exhibitions that are the most exciting to you, or that you'd want to see your own work placed in. And that's kind of a really good place to start.
Okay, great, for sure. I'll definitely look up. There are some galleries I want that I admire. So I'll definitely look them up and see if on their website they have the curators listed. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I have, I guess a couple of general comments or questions just based on some rather intense conversations that I've been involved in the kind of NFT culture here on Clubhouse the last few days. The general tendency of this culture, this visual culture, but also the kind of emotions and attitudes behind it, is one of almost relentless uplift, and kind of positivity and a kind of performative positivity and humility that is like really an essential part of the community. And so I'm like wondering, what role what does a curator actually have to say when they come into this space? And the main message that's being received is one of just, of just good feelings, right? And where the levels of criticality on maybe some of the work you could look at, which is addressing more, where the level of political consciousness in the work is kind of mostly decorative or very, kind of very surface level. And I'm kind of asking this in light of some other behind the scenes conversations I'm having with a queer artist friend of mine who is starting to make work and attempt to venture into this space as another potential venue to get his work out there. But his work is very, kind of political in the sense of queer culture, HIV activism and stuff like that. And I think he's having difficulty figuring out what his footing would be, from introducing that kind of critical work into these platforms and what platform to even go with or approach for it.
I don't know if anyone of the speakers has a particular thought on this.
Was that too much? Sorry.
Sean, so let me try and understand your question here. So are you saying that what is a curator's role in terms of making it clear sort of like the political nature of an artwork?
Well, I guess it's just the role of a curator is to kind of establish a critical context for a body of work within a movement or with an artist's career. But the NFT space is just really a movement largely driven by decorative work and good feelings. And so I'm just wondering, what job could you even undertake in a space like that?
Yeah, okay, Sean, I think I understand what you're saying. And I think the best way to answer your question is by giving you an example. So I don't know if you've seen Async Art did an artwork with Micah Johnson called Sovereignty, where basically in 2 words, the piece revolves around finding sovereign solutions to an ongoing conversation of inequity and inequality with people of color in the United States. And specifically took 2 boys that he photographed and asked, in a conversation, basically asked them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they both said, we want to be an astronaut, but we can't be an astronaut because we're not smart enough because we're black. And as a result, he created this artwork called Sovereignty. And what it does is every year on these kids' birthdays, there's an overlay that pops up on the artwork itself. And anyone that sees the artwork at the time can donate to the kids. And this happens over a period of 11 years. At 18, when the kids, turn 18, they disappear from the artwork altogether. And essentially, the funds that have been accruing for about 11 years, get dispensed to them. And that's the sovereign solution to the ongoing conversation. I think from our perspective, when we were sort of talking about this,
kind of a gamified trust fund.
I don't know if you could necessarily call it gamified, but it is a trust fund of sorts, in that the kids when they turn 18 get this large sum of funds that have been accruing for 11 years. And so from our perspective, when we were sort of talking about it, our role was not, as curators within the company, was not to take a stance on it. Although we had very clear stances on it, and we very much aligned with what Michael was saying and the mission of it. Our stance on it was to present the artwork and present it in its purest form, and then allow audiences to make their own outcomes from it. So from our perspective, we didn't necessarily take a stance on it in terms of the website, but we gave the tools to the audience to be able to make those decisions themselves. And so from that perspective, I will say this, there are a lot of works on the blockchain that are political in nature. And I think that depending on the curator and depending on the event, of course, all of this is very subjective, but, from especially from our end as async art, it's very important for us to be able to convey the story and convey the humanity behind the story, and then allow audiences to make their own, judgments and their own outcomes from it. I think that action speaks much louder than words, and that's sort of the position that we take at Async Art.
Thank you.
I just want to quickly add a point that I think when making any kind of blanket judgment about the NFT space, the NFT space is this at this point, especially looking at the past couple of months. I think if there's anything I've learned as kind of documenting history in my own way, there's always things that you've missed that have been done. So I would just encourage anyone to realize that there's likely been things done that you haven't found yet.
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt. And that's why I prefaced my initial comment with the statement that it was coming out of some deeper conversations that I've had in NFT specific chats with people who are very heavily involved in the space and in the culture, and kind of profiting well off of it, but who do not come from the art world in any way. These are where these are the rooms where the kind of superstars are coming in, the kind of people who are coming more from from meme culture, from kind of DJ culture and other aspects which built the NFT space in kind of are still holding it quite well, as opposed to the people who are now entering into it from a traditional art practice.
Thanks so much, Sean. Just giving space to a few other questions. Michael?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm not an artist, but I'm running my own IT company who's related to creating NFT marketplaces and tokens itself. And I have a different sources of inspiration, such as Japanese cyberpunk. And this morning I woke up with imagine idea of NFT spaces, let's say secret galleries with premium NFTs and premium artists that is secretly hidden, and for the chosen one, let's say. So my question here is: have you ever met such platforms, maybe galleries under the hood, where you can see everything and join only by invites, and maybe I don't know, in kind of secret leagues or something like that? So is it something from imaginary world, or it's something a real one?
Michael, привет. Yes, there are ways to do that, I think, if what I'm understanding is correct, meaning you want to imbue certain artworks with qualities like autonomous and or programmable qualities that appear during certain times and in certain places. Yes, that is possible. At Async Art, we do that kind of technology, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you separately if you'd like to sort of hear out your idea and think through what you're talking about.
Just Sorry, Michael. I'm just conscious of time. I just want to make sure that I give space to the other people that are here with questions. I'd like to wrap it up, I think, at 20 past or 25 past, so in about 5-10 minutes. So, Logan, hello. If you're here, Logan. If not,
I was
no
washing
worries.
dishes. I had to. I just stepped in to chime in with what Sean was saying earlier, but I think he stepped out of the room. So I'll just use this chance to thank Mitchell. Actually, Mitchell, I tried hunting you down on DMs, and you're not that accessible. But I wanted to thank you. You gave me a book recommendation, and I got it, and I'm reading it, on the strange place of religion in contemporary art, and it's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Logan. Oh my goodness, I remember that conversation. It's nice to know that was able to connect with someone, and I hope that was a great book for you. Thank you.
It is. I'm learning a whole nother approach of talking about the work. So thanks.
Great stuff. So if anybody has any other question around the theme or any of the topics that we've discussed, feel free to jump in. I don't know, Peter, if you had any thoughts. I think you had your hand up and was here for a while.
I have a question if Peter is not speaking.
Sure, go ahead.
Well, thanks for inviting me into the room, and it's great to see Sam in the room from Async. I've been doing some hearing a lot of cool things, that the possibility what you can do as an artist with Async, and I was wondering, is there like a list or a Bible of scripts that you can use for your smart contract to change the artwork by night and day or by other kind of things, or do you have to go to a separate platform in order to have this embedded into your smart contract, or do you guys do it?
Thanks for asking the question. Happy to talk separately offline with you about it. In short, we provide the scripts, and we've actually, in some cases, collaborated with artists who have wanted to write their own scripts. Happy to talk with you about it if you like, separately. And the short answer is yes, we do provide the scripts, and we have templates specifically for things like day and night and time of day, whatever.
And is it charged with the gas fee, or is it separate?
Depends on the type of artwork. If it's an artwork that's imbued with lots of images, it may take a gas fee to be able to switch them every day. In other cases, with simple day and night pieces, it's you don't need a gas fee. It doesn't require a gas fee. So it all depends on the situation.
Yeah, because I've been waiting for that, because I make art on metal. It's holographic art, and during the daytime it looks different than during the nighttime. So that's why I want to give people the experience, because everybody's well, you know what? I really have to see. I have it on YouTube, artwork called Freedom of the Mind, and people are looking at that and think you know what? I actually have to see the real physical artwork in order to have that experience. So that's what I was looking for. But we'll talk further offline, seeing that the room is closed, and I want to give other people space to time in real short and ask a question before the room closed. So thanks for having me on stage. I'm done speaking.
Sure.
Thanks a lot.
Happy to connect.
Super. So if anybody else has anything, any other questions, if not, I think we can close it down. Cool. Okay. So, I think like we've, as always, like we touch on a lot of different topics that sometimes go a little bit away from curation, but it's really good to have the chance to speak and flesh all of these ideas out. So we do these rooms every Monday around the same time. So yeah, stay tuned for the next one. And thanks so much to all of the speakers and to everybody who got involved and added their thoughts and questions. It's super good to chat. Thanks a lot.
Thank
everyone. You. Thank you, Nicole, for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye everyone.
Thank you.